In the late 1800s to the early 1900s, the state of Ohio made the choice to build a reformatory for lower criminally, for people who have committed like not heinous crimes, to give them a chance to reform and get back into society and be good citizens. Now, everything was running great there until all hell broke loose, and the site actually became one of the most haunted places in America.
I see you.
Hi guys, it's me, Haley. Welcome back to my channel. So sorry I disappeared on you guys for a minute there. I'll let you know at the end of the video kind of what happened, but also like new hair, because I live in a state of denial, and my favorite words to live by are, if I change my hair, the bad things can't find me anymore. So let's see how that works out, or if I suddenly decide to just go back to neon pink. We'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Anyway, for today's story, we are traveling from last 2 weeks ago episode down in Louisiana up to Ohio, where we're going to talk about the Mansfield Reformatory, or the Ohio State Reformatory, which started out fine and dandy and just went right into the ground. And so we're going to be talking about the history of it, into why it is considered to be such a haunted place today. If you guys enjoy it, let me know what you think down below. If you've got a story you want to hear, again, let me know what you think down below. I will list all of the products off that I am using today down in the description, so feel free to ask any questions you have about that, or let me know if you guys have any specific questions on how I apply things. Anyway, I hope you enjoy today's story. The Ohio State Reformatory began construction in 1886. It was designed by Levi Schofield, and Levi took some, what am I thinking of? Inspiration. Levi took inspiration from like old Gothic revival, Richardson Romanesque, and Queen Anne architecture when building the facility. I guess he wanted the reformatory to kind of resemble like old school German castles. It was supposed to like uplift the people in there and hopefully give them a reason, I guess, to do better. Now, construction did begin in 1886 and it continued until 1910, but 10 years after it began construction, they actually moved 150 inmates into the facility, and part of their sentence or whatever, their job while they were there was to, part of like the deal while they were in the new reformatory for them at the time was that they had to finish helping complete like the build. So the men actually helped to complete the sewer system for the facility, as well as build a 25-foot wall around the entire 15-acre property. The whole idea of this being a reformatory was that it was going to be something that was kind of not as like aggressive, I guess, as like an actual prison. They actually wanted to use the site as a place to reform male inmates who had committed less heinous crimes. So yeah, not cold-blooded killers and things like that. So in order to do so, the facility actually provided the men who were there with an education. So they taught them math, reading, writing, social studies, and then they even had like trade school for them, so they could learn how to do like engineering and plumbing and mechanical work. The inmates also had their own printing shop on property, as well as a sales team and building section where they could manufacture clothes and shoes and furniture to sell. So they were really working on trying to figure out how to make their lives better while they were there. Great. When the men who were sent there, they were all sentenced to an initial 18-month sentence, and they were given 18 months to reform, so to learn and to show that they could make improvements in their life. And if they successfully did that within the 18 months, then they were released, and if they didn't quite make the cut, then they would get another 18-month sentence to restart it all over again and try and continue reforming. And it actually worked pretty well. The prison actually had a pretty high success rate with releasing inmates so that they could do better for their community. Now, I know we mentioned that upon opening in 1886, there were only 150 men who were at the actual reformatory. Now, the entire property was actually massive. It had places for staff to live, it had its own infirmary, church, and things like that, as well as all of the cell blocks, which were some of the largest in the country. They were 5 to 6 stories tall, and they had enough room for 1,200 inmates inside of there, with one per room. Unfortunately, as the world does when something is going super well, you've gotta, not to sound super negative, but it's gotta find a way to shake things up, huh? Well, around the early to mid 1900s, specifically right around 1934, the funding to the reformatory started getting pulled back on, and the government in charge of the specific place there, they determined that they no longer wanted it to be an intermediate site, so they pushed to actually turn it into a back security situation, which was described to be a violent nightmare once this was implemented. They were apparently finding weapons like shivs and knives and even, I don't know, dice and stuff, which, whatever, in the inmates' cells, hidden inside crevices and things. And as well as becoming a max security site, they also increased the population, so it started becoming incredibly overcrowded, and some people were having 2 to 3, some of these cells were containing 2 to 3 inmates, which was well above what they had intended when building the site. With the population increasing like it did, not only was there an increased number of violence and things like that, but also disease began to run rampant throughout the prison, and the building was starting to age. They weren't taking care of it, and inmates began to notice that conditions were seemingly inhumane. There are reports that inmates there were often put into solitary confinement, or what was referred to as the hole, which basically meant it was cells that didn't have windows. They were all concrete rooms. They were completely alone. There were no lights inside, and they were freezing cold, and they were just locked in there for who knows how long, until they cracked, and they were, to make it worse, they were stripped naked and then fed things that probably were not ideal for them. As time went on and the prison aged, conditions of it were really going downhill, and eventually, for men who were incarcerated at the penitentiary at the time, they filed a class action lawsuit against the director of the Ohio State Department of Corrections, as well as against the superintendent of the Ohio State Reformatory. Well, the class action lawsuit was filed under 42 U.S.C. 1983. Basically, the gentleman said that due to conditions at the prison and treatment, their 8th and 14th Amendment rights were being violated while they were at the prison. Now, just to recap, 8th Amendment protects you from government overreaches like the use of excessive bail or excessive fines or cruel or unusual punishment. And the 14th Amendment grants all U.S. citizens, naturally born or given citizenship, protection and due process of the law. Now, they also claimed that at the time of filing the lawsuit, there were over 2,140 inmates at the reformatory. And remember, initially it was only built to house 1,200 inmates, so they had pretty much doubled what was supposed to be in there. Not only that, they were having issues with the plumbing. It was leaking and flooding the bathrooms or the buildings. They were also not getting adequate showers, and they had inconsistent heating and cooling to the building, so they were constantly too hot or freezing. And then there were infestations of rats and cockroaches on the site too. So, and you know as well as I do, rats make people sick. So they also claimed that they were being racially segregated within the facility as well, which was a no-no, like based on jobs. Now, the initial lawsuit, remember, was filed in 1979. Well, it took until 1983 for Judge Frank Battisti, I believe is how you say his name, to finally approve a decree that prohibited the defendants, which were the superintendent and the director of the Ohio State Department of Corrections. But it prohibited him from operating the reformatory after December 31st, 1987, which was a really big gap of time for this to go through. Now, pause for eyeliner. The decree was signed February 1st, 1983, and within it, it was written that the defendants, which the director of the Ohio State Department of Corrections and the superintendent of the Ohio State Reformatory, were told that they were on after December 31st of 1987, they were no longer going to be running the Ohio State Reformatory, which essentially meant that that facility was just going to be shut down. It was signed in 1983, which meant they had 4 years to figure out what exactly they were going to do with the inmate population there. And over that time, the State of Ohio Department of Corrections actually began construction of 2 other facilities within the area so that they could have room for, I guess, more inmates and to rehome the inmates that were currently at the Ohio State Reformatory. It was going to take some time for these two new facilities to open, so the judge had actually given the defendants 6-month extensions, more than one, to continue running the facility as it was, as long as they were running it in good faith to provide better care for the inmates until the new ones opened. The reformatory actually stayed open until 1990, so that was 7 years after the initial decree was actually signed. But in 1990, all inmates were moved and the reformatory was shut down. And almost immediately after the facility was shut down, they actually began demolishing it. And that continued until around 1995, when the Ohio State Reformatory Preservation Society was actually given permission to take over the site so that they could protect it. And the property has actually been in their care ever since. You can go there, you can tour it, they do events there, haunted houses, all that jazz. Of course, the building being as old as it was and as violent as things took turn there there are a number of reported hauntings happening at the reformatory, and some pretty horrific things that are said to have caused said hauntings. So some of the things that they believe has caused this facility to be as haunted as it is, and it is considered to be a very haunted place. Like, multiple ghost hunting shows have been there and have proof that the facility is haunted. And the origins of that would be like on November 2nd of 1926, an inmate named Philip Orleck, who he was paroled from the facility initially, but for some reason sent back there, and he wasn't chill with that, so he wanted to try to escape the facility so he didn't have to stick around. I guess he liked his freedom, but obviously, he wasn't making good choices, clearly. Philip decided he was going to make an escape, and while trying to get out, he actually shot and killed a 72-year-old prison guard named Urban Wilford. Obviously, he was again arrested for that, and 2 months later, Philip was provided with the electric chair at the reformatory. That was not the first inmate on guard death, because again, on October 2nd of 1932, a 48-year-old prison guard named Frank Hanger was killed when 12 inmates tried to make an escape, and Frank was actually beaten to death with a metal bar. It was determined that Frank's death was caused by 2 specific inmates who made an escape, and their names were Merrill Chandler and Chester Probdacki? I can't say his name. Sorry, Chester, no, sorry, you made bad choices. But they were found guilty of killing Frank, and they were both, again, provided with the electric chair. 3 years this time after the initial murder. Now, this is kind of like one of the big true crime stories that originated. Like, it didn't start at the prison, but it eventually ended there. So, on July 21st of 1948, 2 former inmates, John West and Robert Daniels, had made their way back to Ohio after traveling the country. And by traveling the country, I mean going on a 6-week-long crime spree where they attempted and completed multiple robberies and killed 3 people. They decided that they wanted to go back to the reformatory because there was a guard that they had beef with there, and they were going to kill him. John and Robert did not know where this specific guard lived, so they decided that they were going to go to whom they felt was in charge of the guard, and that was a man named John Nebel. He was the superintendent of the farms at the prison. And they were like, yeah, no, we're just gonna go to him. And their initial plan was that they were gonna go there, they were gonna tie John up, get the information out of him, and then go take care of business. So they went there, and they actually went to John's home. And John lived there with his wife his wife Yolanda, and his 21-year-old daughter Phyllis. And so that kind of changed things up, I guess, for the boys. They get there, they messed with the wife and John, and they kind of determined that, you know, like, they were gonna get this information out of Nebel, and then they were gonna have to do something so he couldn't go to the police immediately, so they could still go complete their crime and go kill the guard that they despised so much. So they figured in order to do that, they were gonna have the family strip naked, put them in the car, and then drive them out to a cornfield in the middle of nowhere, where they planned to tie them up and gag them and leave them out there. So hopefully they could buy themselves a couple of hours to commit a crime. Now, it should be noted that one of the gentlemen did decide that he was going to do some horrific things to Phyllis, which was John Nebel's daughter, prior to bringing her out to a cornfield. And so sorry, Phyllis, like, these boys, they get what they deserve. So they get them out to the cornfield, and they suddenly realize, oh no, we don't have anything to tie this family up with, and we still want to go commit a crime. So instead, they shot them all in the freaking heads and killed them there, and left their bodies out in the middle of the cornfield, and then still went to go find this guard. I didn't find out if they actually did manage to do whatever they planned to do to the guard, but when John didn't arrive at work that day at the facility, they felt like something was wrong, because he was not that kind of guy. And so they sent someone to go check on him at his home, and I guess upon entering the home, they could tell immediately, like, the family had been kidnapped. There were obvious signs of that. And then I guess police went around, and they were, like, questioning the neighbors to see what had happened. And one of people living in the area actually said that they had seen a car parked outside of John Nebel's home that they didn't recognize, and it was a two-toned Pontiac. I guess this kind of set off a light bulb, because the Pontiac that was described, whoever was investigating what had happened to John and his family kind of put two and two together, because the car the neighbor had described was also a car that had been seen going across the country and committing multiple robberies and murders, and it belonged to West and Daniels. And so they put that together and were able to determine that that was what had happened. And then they did find, tragically, the family's bodies in the cornfield. Of course, after finding the bodies and putting it all together, there was a manhunt for those two shining citizens, and eventually they were located near Van Wert. And I guess these boys were like, we're not going down without a fight. And so there was a shootout, and I guess, fortunately, the shootout resulted in West's death and Daniel's capture. And of course, this was kind of like their thing. After capturing him, Daniels was given the electric chair at the reformatory. That's just kind of what they do there. Continuing its reign of horrors throughout its lifetime, and this all kind of just happened suspiciously around the time that the property became like overcrowded and started losing its funding, and essentially like the whole reason that it was built. But so continuing that, in 1950, November specifically of 1950, the warden's wife, Phoebe Glatke, remember, lived on the property there. Well, Phoebe was reaching into her closet there, and she was trying to get a jewelry box that she stored at the back of the closet. Unfortunately, there was a firearm also stored in the closet, and I'm not sure if Phoebe was aware of it or not, but the firearm fell out of the closet while she was reaching in there, hit the ground, discharged, and fatally wounded Phoebe. Speaking of this specific incident, it is said that by visitors who go into the home of the wardens, that when they're in there, they can smell like a phantom rose perfume, and rose perfume was apparently Phoebe's favorite, so they think that she's still hanging around there to this day. Of course, it wasn't the end of it, because the prison still had a life to live, but 9 years after Phoebe Glatke passed away there at the prison, the warden himself, the one that was married to Phoebe, Warden Glatke, actually suffered a heart attack in his office at the prison. And again, it's said to this day that people who go into the office or are around the office can actually hear the sound of loud footsteps and pacing happening inside the office, but there's nobody actually in there. And of course, there were only deaths of people who had worked there. There were also recordings of multiple inmate deaths, specifically in the area called the Hole, which, if you remember, was a solitary confinement area. Like, a man who, actually the first one that was recorded there was when they decided to put 2 men into one of the cells there at the reformatory, and upon returning to release the men from their cells later on, after it had been a substantial amount of time, but when they went to go let them out, only 1 man came out. So they went in to go investigate and found the other one had been killed and stuffed underneath the bunk bed there. In the Hole, another man had decided he couldn't take it anymore, and he took his own life by hanging inside of solitary. And another one actually lit himself on fire within the solitary confinement area and killed himself there. It's said that if you are in the area near the cell, or I lost my brush. If you're in the area near the cells or near solitary, it's said that people have felt like they've been shoved in there, or they might hear the sound of loud slamming cell doors while they're in the area. And when you get into the actual solitary area, I guess it's pretty common to feel like a really negative, heavy energy. And not only that, but remember, this was it was its own whole community there, so it had its own infirmary or hospital on the property, which also contained a chapel. And because there had been a huge outbreak of tuberculosis and such a rise in violence there, a lot of inmates did die while inside the infirmary. And it said that over the lifetime of the facility, there were over 200 inmates that had died on the property, and they were actually buried in the cemetery nearby. Now, people who investigated that specific zone on the property have, and these were ghost hunters, have reported that when they get in there, they hear disembodied moaning, and then their equipment battery will just drain completely and die for no reason at all. So, pretty haunted area. Now, I'm gonna go finish this look off, stick some hair onto my eyeballs, and put some lips on, and I will be right back. Okay guys, so this is the finished look. I really like it. We tried out a lot of new projects today, and I do want to do some honorable mentions here real quick, because I tried out a couple of things and I actually really like them, and I want to share those with you just in case you're I really need something of this specific category. So first things first, this Stone Cold Fox palette by ColourPop. Perfect. She's got great cool tones for somebody of my coloring, or, you know, just people who prefer cool tone things and not such warm eyeshadow. Nothing wrong with that. I do love a good warm look occasionally, but this is like very wearable for me. Now, up next, I want to talk about these. These are by Danessa Myricks, and I have and they're color fix. They're like liquid eyeshadow things. This one is a matte white, which is what I used to cut my crease today. Did phenomenally. And the second one is this foil, and this one's in the shade Milky Way. The other one's in the shade Lift, but this Milky Way one, like, guys, look how shiny that is. I love it. Like, and I know that Sephora is doing their beauty event this week, and I think that some of these are marked down. So if you get a chance, check them out. They're incredible. Speaking of things by Danessa Myricks, let me continue this whole spiel, but I got some crispy lady skin over here right now. I'm having a lot of medical problems, and they keep putting me on different medications, and it is messing my skin up. So that means my makeup's not always looking exactly how I want it to, which is incredibly disappointing for me. I decided to give her Moisture Repair Balm serum a try, which I actually opted to use today instead of a primer. And honestly, guys, I think that this really helped this situation here with my dryness. Highly recommend. It's not her cream foundation that turns like a matte powdery finish. I don't think that would work out for me, but this Moisture Repair Balm, phenomenal. Up next, and this will be my last thing that I'm going to mention about this today, this One Size powder melt, specifically because I do also, like, again, crispy skin lady over here. This melted all of my powders together, and honestly, I don't think I look crispy at all right now. I think I look kind of hydrated, so thank you, Danessa and Patrick Starr, for your help today, because I really needed it, because I am actually testing out this makeup look. Because do you know why I wanted to talk about this specific place today? Guess where Haley gets to go next month? I'm so excited, you guys. I actually get to go see the Ohio State Reformatory for INKcarceration. And yeah, I absolutely will be doing that while in pain and on crutches, because I just had that procedure to help with my CRPS, and they injected stuff into my spine. It did not go well for me. I ended up with dural headaches and had to lay flat for the last 2 weeks, because every time I sat up I thought I was going to like full-on Reagan everywhere, and then like my head would start hurting really bad, and I just had to lay on the floor and cry it out. I'm better now, mostly. We're still trying to figure out what's going on there, but I have decided that I am tired of letting my horrible medical conditions run my life, and I really want to go and just finally like experience something that I've always wanted to do, and that will be INKcarceration. And if you guys are gonna go, like, I would love to say hi to you, or I don't know, I know I'm not even that popular on here, it's fine, but I still want to talk to you guys. It's incredibly lonely being medically horrible. But that's enough of that. Anyway, that's why I tested this look out. Let me know what you think. Is it too much? Do I care if it's too much? Not really. I let a career and a man dull my sparkle for a lot of years. I don't think we're gonna do that anymore, so I think this is kind of what we're gonna go for. I don't know. Also, so sorry, one more thing. The hair, in case you noticed, I went pastel. So let me know what you think of that too. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's story, or my random just spewing of facts right there at the end about myself, because I'm so sorry I missed 2 weeks of uploads. I was in a way. But if you like today's video, you like my story, you like me, give me a comment down below. Let me know what your favorite band is, or like what's your dream event that you want to go to, or even if there's like a story that you're specifically looking to hear about. I would really like to talk to you guys down in the comments, and I will see you again next week for a different story. Alright guys, love you, bye.